on adding and subtracting fractions and mixed numbers in story problems. So remember, before we can add or subtract, we must make an estimate, which we worked on last week. So we'll be using those skills again today and the next couple of days. So if you look at the math message, Dina and her brother are making 2 kinds of bread. Both recipes call for 2/3 cup of flour. How much flour do they need in all? So the first thing you must figure out is what operation are you doing? So since we are asking how much we need in all, we know that we are actually doing 2/3 plus 2/3. So we must look at our fraction number line poster to figure out what 2/3 is closest to. So if we look at 2/3 here, is it closest to our benchmark fraction of 1, a half, or 0? So if we look here, it looks like it's closest to our half. So for our estimate, we can say that we have a half plus a half, which means our estimate would equal 1 whole. So now we can go ahead and solve. So 2/3 plus 2/3, since the denominators are already alike, we do not need to do anything, and we will get 4/3. Or do we know another name for that? So we worked on renaming in 3/8 and 3/4. So remember, this is really a division sign. So how many times does 3 go into 4? 1 whole time. Your remainder goes in your numerator of 1/3. So we get 1 or 1/3. Our estimate was 1. Does that mean that our answer is reasonable? I would say so. If we look at adding mixed numbers, it's very similar. So Andre bought 1 3/4 pounds of ham and 2 2/4 pounds of beef. How many pounds did he buy in all? So again, we want to know in all. Bought some ham and some beef. So again, our number model is going to look like 1 3/4 plus 2 2/4 equals, I don't know, since it says pounds, let's say equals P for pounds of meat. So again, we need to estimate our answer. So 1 3/4, what is that closest to? If you're not sure, we can bring up our fraction number line poster again. We know we have a whole, but let's look at the 3/4. Remember, this is halfway in between our half benchmark and our whole benchmark, kind of like 5 is when we're rounding whole numbers. So remember what we said, we are going to round up. So since I had 1 3/4 and then around 3/4 to another whole, which has to add to the other whole that I had, so it's actually going to become 2. So 1 3/4 rounds to 2. And 2 2/4, isn't that already a benchmark fraction? 2/4 is also equivalent to 1/2. So since it's already a benchmark fraction, I don't need to do anything to it. So we get 4.5 pounds is our estimate. Our actual answer, though, if we add our whole numbers together first, so we add 1 and 2, that gives us 3. Then add our numerators, since the denominators are the same. We get 5/4. That's an improper fraction. So can we make it into a proper fraction within the mixed number? So 4 goes into 5 1 whole time, but don't forget you had 3 in the whole, so that actually equals 4, with the remainder of 1, which goes in our numerator, So 4 1/4. Is 4 1/4 pounds of meat close to 4 1/2? I would say so. Okay, so we've been working on adding. Now let's look at subtracting. If Monique had 2 1/6 graham crackers and she ate 1 4/6 crackers with her lunch, how many crackers did she have left? So the first thing, again, we will make our number model. So I know a lot of you want to put 1 4/6 because you see that 4/6 is the larger fraction, but that is not the correct way. Remember, Monique is starting with 2 1/6 graham cracker, and she ate 1 4/6 of the graham cracker. We have to figure out how much she has left, so let's make it C for cracker. First thing we need to do is make an estimate. So 2 1/6. Well, if you're not sure, again, let's pull up our number line poster. 1/6. We know we already have 2. What is 1/6 closer to? Is it closer to 0 or is it closer to my half? I would say it's closer to 0. Okay, and the other fraction was 4/6. So is 4/6 closest to a half or closest to 1? Again, I would say this is closest to a half. So now that we know our estimate, let's go back and write it down. 2 1/6. Remember, we said 1/6 is closest to 0, but we still have that 2 as our whole number. Minus, we said 4/6 was closest to a half, but don't forget you still have that whole number of 1 that you have to include. So 1 1/2 equals 2 minus 1 1/2 is going to equal a half. Our actual answer, though, is a little harder. Because I can do 2 minus 1, but can you do 1 minus 4? In this case, we can't. So this is where our renaming fractions comes into play. Remember in lesson 3.8, we rename fractions by drawing the picture. So let's draw 2 1/6 graham crackers. So I have 2 whole graham crackers. And then this is my 1/6, which is hard to see, but that is my 1/6 of a graham cracker. So remember, we traded a whole for whatever our denominator was. So this time we're going to take this graham cracker and we're going to trade 1 graham cracker for 6/6 pieces. Because we are essentially borrowing. So now my new name for this is 1 7/6 graham cracker. So now we have 1 7/6, and I'm going to subtract 1 4/6 from that. See, before I didn't have enough. I only had 2 1/6, so we had to borrow to make this 7/6. So 7/6 minus 4/6 gives me 3/6, and 1 minus 1 gives me 0. So I have 3/6 of a graham cracker left. Is that close to what we said? Yep, it is. It's actually exactly our estimate. And sometimes that does happen. So be careful, guys. Subtraction sometimes requires some borrowing where you have to rename your fraction before you can subtract.